UFOs are sometimes reported in conjunction with other paranormal activities, such as ghosts and poltergeists. Of course, we as Christians know that paranormal activity is really demonic activity.
God! Please, Lord, help me to release this demon! Thank you, Lord.
Welcome back everyone to Bridge the Divide, where I examine irrational beliefs, the irrational behaviors that often follow, and how we, with education, rationality, and reason, can bridge the societal divides that they create. Today, we're heading back over to the channel Bible Flock Box.
We got a box! Call the bomb squad, I need a bomb squad, we got a box!
To check out a video from the staunchly Catholic and perpetually terrified of everything Greg Sereda, in which he breaks down what he warns are the 7 signs of
demonic possession.
I'm possessed!
Now, given the extreme nature of such a claim, the question is, can he actually back any of it up?
Somehow I doubt that.
So let's dive in and see exactly what evidence Greg has to support this extraordinary diagnosis for instances of extreme aberrant human behavior that obviously every single medical professional and institute studying human behavior has apparently missed.
While the idea of possession by evil spirits may seem far-fetched to some, the Bible is clear that this is a reality.
Well, Greg, that would be because it's not only far-fetched, but it's also completely illogical. But we'll get into that shortly. And no, claiming that demonic possession happens just because your particular book claims that it happens does not entail that it actually happens in reality, because you cannot eliminate the logical possibility that ancient peoples with virtually no understanding of human psychology, brain chemistry, or disease vectors were not simply misidentifying completely natural occurrences of personality and behavioral changes due to things like genetics, autism, viral and bacterial infections, psychological trauma, or mental illness as demonic possession. Already, I think we can see from Greg's tone that his video is not intended for non-believers, his target audience obviously being people who have already been convinced that demonic possession is a thing that happens in reality. But unless you've got some actual independently verifiable evidence for demonic possession, Greg, which of course would include the evidence that such entities actually exist,
the power of Christ compels you!
Oh, does it? Does it compel me?
then ultimately you're just begging the question.
In the Bible, demonic possession is described as a state in which an individual is under the control of a malevolent spirit.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty well understood, given the use of words like demonic and possession,
leading to various physical and mental symptoms. We are going to explore what those symptoms are in this video as I present to you 7 signs of demonic possession.
Okay, Greg, so you're going to present signs of demonic possession, which of course makes me curious as to the methodology you're utilizing to determine how any of these signs that you're pointing to as evidence are themselves distinguishable in any way from the various symptoms of naturally occurring ailments that we already possess a keen understanding of.
Number 1. A fascination with graveyards.
Seriously? A fascination with graveyards?
Safest place in the world to be.
It's because everybody's dead.
Given that it's usually extraordinary and extreme changes in behaviors that believers usually identify as demonic possession, I will say I find it rather weird that you would use the term fascination here, when it would seem more apropos to utilize more contextually aligned terminology like obsession, fixation, or compulsion. Those terms imply a fundamental or pathological preoccupation, whereas fascination is really just another word for possessing a strong interest.
Fascinating.
You can see in my own background many of the things that I myself am fascinated by, but I don't possess that fascination to a degree that it would disrupt my daily life or result in extreme behavior like a pathological compulsion would. And given that cemeteries are literally the human concern with the finality of death made manifest, there are a number of reasons why any one person could be fascinated by them. Reasons that can range from a sense of nostalgia, to an emotional sense of peace, to the variety of aesthetics, or maybe it's the inescapable irony of finite beings erecting finite monuments to remember other finite beings. Whichever valid reason it may be, in the end, graveyards are just arbitrary places that hold extreme emotional significance for us because they're where we choose to bury our dead. So Greg, unless you've got some kind of objective scale that indicates to us where a person's interest shifts from completely innocuous to full-blown demonic possession, how exactly is finding graveyards interesting a sign of demonic possession?
Matthew chapter 8 verse 28 tells us,
well, I hate to burst your bubble there, but that's just a story in your Bible, which makes it completely irrelevant. You're making claims about demonstrable reality, Greg, so it behooves you to have some evidence not only to support the mechanistic connection between cemetery interest and demonic possession, but also evidence that demonstrates how we can differentiate between demonic possession and mental illness.
You know, I think it's no coincidence that many occult religions have a fascination with graveyards.
Well, yeah, because many pagan groups of the ancient world practiced ancestor worship. It was the current generation honoring the ones who came before them, because without the great deeds and sacrifices of their ancestors, none of them would even be there. And given that their ancestors were, dead, it would make sense that their graveyards would become focal points of their worship. But these facts of history are themselves not evidence for demonic possession. But what they are evidence for is how Christianity vilified and then eventually co-opted the beliefs and practices of pagan cultures in order to eventually supplant them with their own system of rituals and practices.
For example, in voodoo
magic.
Graveyards are considered to be powerful places of spiritual energy.
You do realize, Greg, that Haitian voodoo arose as a syncretism between Western and Central African religious traditions and Roman Catholicism, right?
And practitioners go there to make offerings or seek guidance from the spirits of their ancestors or other beings.
Yeah, it's really no different than Catholics praying to their various dead saints.
In Santeria,
what's Santeria?
Graveyards are considered to be places where spirits of the dead and ancestors reside, and practitioners may go there to make offerings and seek guidance and protection from those spirits.
Santeria is another example of Roman Catholicism syncretizing with other faiths. Enslaved West Africans, most of them Yoruba, brought their religious traditions to Cuba, where over time they mixed with the Roman Catholicism that was introduced by Spanish colonialists. I have to say, I'm confused, Greg. Is your problem here with demons and demonic possession? Or is it with the historical influence of the Catholic Church?
Some forms of Satanism, like the Church of Satan, incorporate elements of death and the macabre in their rituals, including graveyards and other places associated with the dead.
That you don't realize that groups like the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple, neither of which actually believes that Satan exists and are in fact atheistic groups, are just trolling you because they know that by giving you exactly what you expect to get your panties in a twist is objectively hilarious.
By the way, spirit worship is just another form of demon worship.
Well, this is of course just how Christians denigrate the beliefs of other groups and is not evidence of anything in regards to demons or demonic possession. So far, this entire presentation hasn't been anything but you, Greg, maligning and defaming other faith groups because they don't believe exactly as you believe.
This is an age-old practice the Bible warns about.
Sure, Christians don't like the rituals and practices of other cultures, and they really want to dictate how other people should live their lives. What's this got to do with anything? So we're gonna skip this next part because it's just Greg citing from the Bible again, and he provides no evidence whatsoever for the supposed connection between an interest in graveyards and demonic possession that is, of course, beyond his subjective party line denigration of other cultures that don't believe exactly as he believes.
That's not a good start, but keep going.
Number 2, excessive violence.
Well, we know that extreme and unpredictable violent outbursts can be a major symptom of numerous mental illnesses and disorders such as schizophrenia and PTSD, because such conditions can result in auditory and visual hallucinations, extreme paranoia, and detachments from reality, which can result in hair-trigger and irrational fight responses to perceived threats. But we understand these features for what they are. So the question is, how exactly are you differentiating them from violent outbursts due to demonic possession?
In reference to the 2 demon-possessed men Jesus encountered in the tombs,
again, citing the Bible is not evidence because the Bible is the claim. Move along.
demons are evil, malevolent beings who seek to harm and destroy those whom they possess.
Well, that doesn't make any sense, at least from a logical perspective. Now, to understand this, we have to look at exactly what goal would be served by a demon possessing a human being.
Ah, shit. Here we go.
To kick things off, we have to look at the 2 forces involved here in the Christian worldview. God and its angels, and Satan and its demons. The two groups stand in direct opposition to one another, and the battleground can either be interpreted as anything from the earth itself to the human soul. In a normal war scenario, each side has the potential to win the overall engagement. If this were the case, then the act of demonic possession is akin to a battlefield tactic employed by a soldier designed to reduce their opponent's access to valuable resources, which in this case would be human souls, in order to tip the numerical scales to their advantage in the coming final conflict. And given the necessity of human faith in this conflict, then the best tactic would be for demons to reduce the strength of or eliminate the necessity of faith as much as possible with every action. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if the human's faith is put in Satan itself or some other thing, or is lost entirely, just so long as it is not in the god. Of course, this tactic doesn't track logically. In the scope of this thought experiment, demons have two targets that they can attack: believers and non-believers. And there are two methods by which the demon can attack them. They can overtly attack their target, or they can attack them subtly. If the method employed by this demon is an overt one, then unfortunately targeting a believer, someone who already accepts possession as a logical possibility, will only serve to strengthen their faith through the direct confirmation of what they already hold to be true. And if the believer does not happen to believe that demonic possession is true, that direct confirmation would certainly strengthen their faith, even more so than the believer who already thinks such an event can happen. Not to mention, all of the people around the possessed have their faith strengthened as well, and individuals saved from possession often report that their own faith has strengthened because of the ordeal. Either way, attacking believers makes the least amount of logical sense, as it is, in a sense, preaching to the converted. And if the demon were to target a non-believer, the effect is somewhat identical, as direct confirmation of these supernatural elements would of course logically entail that the atheist would then at minimum become a theist, and at maximum a full-blown Christian adherent. Whichever target is chosen, the scales tip to the advantage of God. But if the method of attack is more subtle, meaning that the symptoms exhibited by the afflicted are indistinguishable from mental illness, then the outcome for the believer actually remains the same, as they will still interpret the affliction as possession, thus confirming their position, while the non-believer will have no rational reason to see anything other than the symptoms of mental illness, and thus have no rational reason to see a change in their position. Again, while not as strong an outcome as an overt attack would elicit, the scales tip to the advantage of God. Of course, all of that is taking into consideration the possibility that either side could possibly win the conflict, but in the Christian worldview, the conflict's outcome was set at the beginning. Satan cannot possibly win, so the entire conflict is rendered moot. Which would mean any attack by demons on humans would be purely out of general principle. They know they can't win over all, so their best option is just to flaccidly stick it to the god where they can to get their kicks. But even if the entire conflict is out of principle, does overtly or even subtly attacking humans work to any logical advantage? And the answer is again, no, because if the demon invariably pushes a higher percentage of people towards God with their attacks, then any attack would just further cement their losing position. So given that openly attacking humans is completely counterintuitive in either scenario, what's a Satan, and by extension a demon, to do? And the answer is quite simple. The most logical and strategically sound strategy is to do nothing at all. If Satan and its demons do nothing at all, then they never inadvertently give the other side more ammunition that can be then in turn used against them. The non-believer never encounters a scenario that would rationally push them towards God, and thus their position never changes, while the believer is faced with a lifetime of faith without direct confirmation, and while this may be fine with a good many Christians, it won't work for all of them. And as people age and experience the world, the odds that their faith will decrease or be lost entirely will invariably increase. If the entire conflict is pre-decided and all actions are simply out of pure principle, then it actually behooves the demonic side to simply not engage.
The only winning mood is not to play.
So seeing as how your claim doesn't logically hold any water, Greg, you may want to rethink your entire approach to this subject. Unless, of course, you can demonstrate that you yourself have some kind of direct insight into the minds of God and Satan that nobody else does.
When a person is possessed by a demon, their thoughts, emotions, and actions are controlled by that demon.
First, I have got to find your source for goth model stock footage, because that shit is fire for cutting music videos. Second, I'm glad you're finally addressing physical behaviors that are associated with demonic possession. So which behaviors exactly are you going to cite that are themselves distinguishable from the symptoms of mental illness?
This leads them to exhibit violent and aggressive behavior as it seeks to harm others, and the person it possesses.
So it's not distinguishable from extreme mental illness symptoms, like those associated with schizoaffective disorders or intermittent explosive disorder, or those terrifying symptoms of infectious encephalitis or rabies. And viewer beware, if you have not seen videos of patients in the excitation phase of rabies, they are not for the faint of heart, and you will quickly see for yourself why ancient people could easily identify the symptoms of the virus as demonic possession.
Number 3, supernatural strength.
Finally, now we're getting to the good stuff. Actual evidence of the supernatural. Wait, hang on a second. That actually doesn't work, because if there was direct evidence that could explain something in the natural world, then it couldn't be classified as supernatural anymore. So that probably means that what you're about to refer to here, Greg, are instances of extreme human behavior that you can't readily explain. Damn, I thought we had something there for a moment.
See, now you got me all excited.
In the description of one of the men that Jesus encountered in the tombs, Mark chapter 5 verses 3 through 4 says,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to cut you off there, Greg, because once again, biblical citations are irrelevant. Do you have some actual evidence to cite? Because if all you've got is your Bible to back up your claims, then your video is pretty pointless.
Demons are powerful beings, and when a demon possesses someone, it can influence the body of that person, resulting in them exhibiting supernatural strength or abilities.
So you cited the claim in the Bible, and then took the time to completely reword the claim so that you could claim it again, and that's supposed to back up your assertion?
To be honest, I expected more.
Is the word epistemology even in your lexicon?
Number 4, self-harm.
Technically, you didn't really need to cite this one because it falls under the umbrella of extreme violence. And self-harm is a prevalent symptom in many of the conditions I mentioned earlier, which means that this purported sign of demonic possession you're presenting here is in fact completely indistinguishable from the naturalistic explanation.
This reminds me of self-cutting. Self-cutting is an injury that people inflict upon themselves to cope with emotional pain, anger, and stress.
Yes, the act of self-harm is often utilized as a coping strategy for a variety of very real, very complex, and very serious emotional issues. And out of respect for the individuals who struggle with such things on a daily basis, I'm not going to mince words with you, Greg. What you are positing here is profoundly irresponsible. You need to stop doing it, and you should be legitimately ashamed of yourself. You attributing acts of self-harm to demonic possession is not only disturbingly ignorant, but also dangerously reductive, because it psychologically diminishes the suffering individual's unique emotional experience and thus their very identity by reinforcing their sense of a loss of control and power in their own lives and reducing their sense that they can ever hope to get that power and control back. This grotesque tactic that you are employing can result in the victim being denied the crucial help that they need, and can often result in even more extreme and potentially life-threatening expressions of self-harm. From this point, I'm going to skip this next little section because it's just Greg making a phenomenally ignorant and repugnant statement about teenagers having a general inability to deal with stress. He never once mentions any of the other numerous multifaceted factors that inform why an individual may self-harm, and I for one am not going to put that shit out into the world. Suffice to say, Greg here possesses zero understanding of human psychology, and his reductive approach is both irresponsible and directly harmful. And I'm going to skip this next section because it's just Greg slowly and painfully reading out an article that was published on Forbes that detailed out the surveyed effects of the pandemic on the mental health of youth in America. Yeah, Greg, vast swaths of the country had to shut down and millions had to shelter in place as we collectively worked to get a handle on the pandemic before it caused more damage than it already did, and that course of action had a massively negative effect on the mental health of many people. I know this because during the pandemic, the state of Texas classified me as an essential worker, and I saw these effects firsthand on a near daily basis. That being said, Greg, you're referencing the pandemic, which was a thing that actually happened, and you're referencing the social effects of combating the pandemic, which we also understand. So beyond the direct evidence that extended confinement presents an extreme psychological danger to mental health, which really should be an argument for ending the use of solitary confinement in prisons, how exactly does any of this play into your demonic possession claims?
Now, I'm not saying that all of these cases are instances of demonic possession, but it leads me to wonder how many may be.
Zero! There is a 0% chance.
You have no evidence at all to justify claiming any of them could be demonic possession, and I've already explained how the act of demonic possession does not hold up logically. So at this point, you're just begging the question, and even worse, you're fear-mongering. I'm also going to skip this next section because it's just Greg slowly and excruciatingly making the claim that the reason demonic possession is often misdiagnosed as mental illness is not because doctors aren't in the habit of establishing a diagnosis on assumptions backed by zero evidence, but it's because these doctors lack spiritual discernment.
Kinda dangerous, ain't it?
Which of course makes zero sense, because how exactly can one have spiritual discernment beyond the scope of their own personal biases, which can dangerously increase the chances of doing unnecessary harm to the patient if there exists no methodological way to discern the distinction between naturalistic explanations and spiritual ones.
Number 5. Nakedness.
I sense another irrelevant Bible reference coming on.
Speaking of one of the demoniacs in the tombs, Luke chapter 8 verse 27 says, "And he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in the tombs."
Yep, completely irrelevant Bible reference is completely irrelevant. And we're going to jump past this section because in lieu of any evidence, Greg just recounts an unverifiable story out of Zimbabwe that was published on a global missionary website, in which a local woman purportedly claimed to having gone to bed every night clothed but waking up in the morning completely naked. And upon hearing this, the missionary that the woman went to try and find out an explanation immediately concluded that it was the work of evil spirits, and thus quickly had her baptized, and apparently after that she stopped waking up naked. And that, of course, was the extent of any kind of investigation into the event.
Number 6. Physical maladies.
So while my money is on more indistinguishable symptoms, let's hear what Greg has for us.
You know, sometimes people experience illness as a result of the devil.
Any evidence at all for that extreme claim would be appreciated.
Again, not all illnesses are a result of demonic possession, but the Bible is clear that Satan has power to make people ill.
And until you can provide some methodology that can determine the difference between the two, your claim is baseless, and no one, for the sake of their own safety and the safety of others, should even remotely take it seriously.
Number 7. Physical suffering.
This feels familiar.
I hate to tell you this, Greg, but your attempts to pad your runtime by repeating yourself are both desperate and obvious.
Some forms of suffering are signs of demonic possession, including foaming at the mouth, gnashing teeth, becoming rigid, and convulsions.
Well, now that's interesting. Foaming at the mouth, persistent biting, spine and neck rigidity, and seizures, all of which happen to be exact descriptions of the symptoms of 3rd and 4th stage rabies infection. It's almost like ancient people had a really bad habit of attributing inappropriate explanations to various phenomena that they didn't fully understand. And we're going to skip this next part because it's just Greg reading the scripture that describes what is very likely a person who was infected with rabies.
And really the reason why these things happen, like convulsions, cries of agony, and other forms of physical suffering, is because there's a struggle going on between the demon and the person being possessed.
If you or someone you know are experiencing any of the various symptoms that have been discussed in this video, please bypass your church and get to your nearest medical provider immediately. Stopping to pray is likely going to delay potentially life-saving treatment.
And these are symptoms of the demon attempting to exert its power over the person's body and mind.
Once again, nothing but claims and zero evidence to back any of them up. But to be perfectly honest, what else would we expect from Greg, whose sole intention is to sell fearful Christians their validation right back to them? Now, when it comes to bridging the divide here, the only thing I can really suggest is, in the event of a potential medical emergency, such as a person being afflicted by something that is fundamentally altering their behavior to an extreme and negative degree, do not listen to charlatans like Greg, whose ignorant and irresponsible claims can only lead to a delay in necessary treatment and potentially death, and instead listen to your trained medical professional who is not going to begin their diagnosis with a baseless assumption. Rest assured that demonic possession is not a thing that happens in reality, that it was an inappropriate label that many ancient cultures gave to a variety of mental and physical phenomena that scared them, and that the best way to shut down fear-mongering grifters like Greg here is to combat their willful ignorance by educating yourself beyond the scope of an ancient collection of books written by a people who didn't even know a Western Hemisphere existed. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. And be sure to leave a comment below. I love reading your responses, and those interactions help with the dreaded algorithm. Don't forget, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. A link to where you can support these important efforts is down in the description. And if you love scary movies, be sure to check out me and my filmmaker friends over at the Week in Horror podcast, now in our 5th season. Everything you need to become a channel member here, get yourself some official Bridge the Divide gear, or support the podcast is down in the description. Once again, a massive thank you to each and every one of you for supporting this channel, and as always, be safe, be excellent to each other, and together we can bridge the divide.